Be so consistent that you become unstoppable. Not motivated, not excited, not waiting for the perfect moment. Just consistent. Because motivation fades, talent gets ignored, and luck eventually runs out. But consistency compounds, and once it compounds, it becomes impossible to stop. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone with less talent than you is winning. Someone with fewer resources is ahead. Someone who started later is already building momentum. The difference is not intelligence or opportunity. The difference is that they kept showing up when it was boring, uncomfortable, and invisible. Consistency is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel heroic. It looks ordinary, repetitive, and sometimes pointless. But that's exactly why it works. While others chase intensity, consistent people quietly build power. If you're listening to this, chances are you're tired of starting over. Tired of strong beginnings that fade. Tired of knowing what to do but not becoming the person who does it every single day. You don't need another strategy. You need a stronger relationship with repetition. Most people misunderstand consistency. They think it means high energy every day. It doesn't. It means showing up even when the energy is gone. Even when the excitement has died. Even when the results haven't arrived yet. Unstoppable people don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. They don't ask how they feel. They ask what needs to be done. And then they do it without negotiation. Your biggest enemy isn't lack of discipline. It's emotional decision-making. Working only when you feel good. Resting when things get hard. Quitting when progress slows. Consistency removes emotion from execution. Momentum doesn't come from motivation. Momentum comes from proof. Proof that you can trust yourself. Proof that you keep promises. Proof that you don't disappear when things get uncomfortable. Every time you show up, your identity strengthens. Every time you quit, your doubt gets louder. Your brain believes actions, not intentions. Over time, consistency rewires how you see yourself. At first, discipline feels heavy because you're fighting an old identity. But once consistency becomes who you are, effort feels lighter. Not because the work is easy, but because resistance is gone. Unstoppable people don't debate with themselves. They don't dramatize effort. They don't wait to feel ready. They execute, even when it's quiet, boring, and unrewarded. Most people quit right before the breakthrough. Not because they're weak, but because they don't understand how growth works. Growth is invisible before it's obvious. Consistency is staying long enough to see it. You don't need guarantees. You need commitment. When you stay consistent long enough, results stop being a possibility and become inevitable. This audiobook is here to build that version of you. The one who doesn't stop. The one who doesn't reset every month. The one who keeps moving forward regardless of mood, fear, or doubt. Consistency doesn't start with discipline. It starts with honesty. You have to stop lying to yourself about why things haven't changed yet. It's not because life is unfair. It's not because you're unlucky. It's because repetition hasn't lasted long enough. Most people overestimate what they can do in a week and underestimate what they can become in a year. They want fast proof, quick wins, instant feedback. But consistency works on a different timeline. It rewards patience, not urgency. The hardest part isn't starting. The hardest part is continuing when nothing is happening. When no one is clapping. When progress feels invisible. That's where consistency becomes rare, and rarity creates value. Your brain is wired to avoid discomfort. It wants efficiency, pleasure, and certainty. Consistency asks for the opposite. It asks you to do the same thing again without emotional reward. That's why most people quit. Not because the task is hard, but because boredom feels unbearable. But boredom is the gateway. When you can act without stimulation, you gain control. You stop being driven by dopamine and start being driven by purpose. And purpose outlasts pleasure every time. Consistency teaches patience. Patience builds confidence. Confidence creates calm execution. Calm execution leads to results. This is the chain most people break too early. You don't need to feel confident before you act. Confidence is the result of repeated action. Every small follow-through strengthens trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of unstoppable momentum. When consistency becomes part of your identity, you stop negotiating. You stop asking if today matters. You already know it does. One workout matters. One page matters. 1 hour matters. Because consistency turns small actions into permanent change. Unstoppable people don't rely on intensity. Intensity burns out. They rely on pace. Pace keeps them in the game. They move slower, but they never stop. There will be days when your mind tells you to quit. Not loudly, but subtly. It will say, take today off. You deserve a break. Start again tomorrow. Consistency is recognizing that voice and choosing action anyway. Discipline is not punishment. It's self-respect in motion. It's the decision to honor future you over present comfort. Every time you do that, your standards rise. Your environment also matters. Consistency becomes harder in chaos. Organize your space. Simplify your goals. Remove friction. Make the right action easier than the wrong one. You don't need to be extreme. You need to be reliable. Reliability compounds faster than brilliance. When people can predict that you'll show up, opportunities follow. Trust follows. Progress follows. Consistency also protects you from overthinking. When action is scheduled, thinking becomes irrelevant. You stop waiting for clarity and create clarity through movement. Eventually, something shifts. The thing you used to force becomes automatic. The resistance fades. The habit installs itself. And once that happens, stopping feels harder than continuing. This is the moment most people never reach. Not because it's impossible, but because it requires staying long enough for the brain to adapt. Consistency is not glamorous, but it is powerful. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It just keeps moving forward. And forward over time becomes unstoppable. At some point, consistency stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like normal. This is the line most people never cross. Before this point, you push. After this point, you move. The work no longer feels optional. It feels expected. This is where identity locks in. You no longer say, I'm trying. You say, this is what I do. And when behavior matches identity, quitting feels unnatural. Unstoppable people don't have stronger willpower. They have fewer decisions. They already decided who they are. The decision to show up was made long ago. Now they just follow through. Mental toughness isn't about pushing harder. It's about staying steady. It's about continuing without drama, without self-pity, without constant emotional analysis. Just calm execution day after day. Most people break under pressure because pressure exposes inconsistency. When life becomes heavy, habits reveal themselves. If consistency isn't installed before pressure arrives, collapse is inevitable. That's why you build consistency when life is calm. You train your nervous system to act without panic. You practice stability so chaos doesn't knock you off course. Consistency also removes fear. Fear feeds on uncertainty. When you know you'll show up regardless of outcome, fear loses power. You stop worrying about failure because effort is guaranteed. There will still be slow days. There will still be resistance. But resistance no longer controls behavior. It becomes background noise. The difference between average and unstoppable is not talent. It's tolerance. Tolerance for boredom. Tolerance for repetition. Tolerance for delayed rewards. Delayed rewards build permanent confidence. Quick rewards build dependency. Consistency teaches you to operate without immediate payoff. Over time, your standards rise. You no longer accept inconsistency from yourself. You don't need motivation. You don't need reminders. Your identity enforces the standard. People will notice. Not because you talk about it, but because your output doesn't stop. Your presence doesn't disappear. Your progress doesn't reset. Consistency turns time into an ally. Time starts working for you instead of against you. Each day stacks on the last. Momentum compounds quietly. Eventually, the question changes. You no longer ask, will this work? You ask, how far can this go? because stopping isn't part of the equation anymore. Unstoppable doesn't mean perfect. It means persistent. It means you keep moving even when you slow down, even when you adjust, even when you rest intentionally instead of quitting emotionally. This is what real confidence looks like. Calm, grounded, predictable, built on evidence, not emotion. Once you reach this stage, motivation becomes irrelevant. Consistency runs the system, and the system produces results whether you feel ready or not. This is how people quietly win. And once you're here, there's no going back. Consistency changes how you see time. You stop thinking in days and start thinking in years. You stop chasing short-term wins and start building long-term outcomes. This shift alone separates people who struggle from people who scale. Most people live reactive lives. They respond to what's urgent, not what's important. Consistency flips that. It trains you to invest in the future even when the present doesn't reward you yet. This is where legacy thinking begins. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing today?" and start asking, "What kind of person am I becoming?" Every consistent action answers that question. Unstoppable people understand finishing power. Starting is common. Finishing is rare. Finishing requires showing up long after the excitement is gone. Long after the audience leaves. Long after doubt creeps in. Finishing builds a reputation with yourself. And once you trust yourself to finish, you stop fearing long journeys. Big goals stop feeling intimidating because you know you won't abandon them halfway. Consistency also simplifies life. When your actions are predictable, stress decreases. You don't scramble. You don't rush. You don't panic. You execute according to plan. This creates inner peace. Not because life gets easier, but because you get steadier. You stop being thrown off by every setback. You adjust and continue. Setbacks no longer feel personal. They feel procedural. Something to analyze, not something to emotionally react to. Consistency turns problems into data. You don't need perfect conditions. You need commitment under imperfect conditions. That's where consistency becomes unstoppable. Over time, the gap between who you were and who you are becomes undeniable. Not overnight. Gradually. Quietly. Powerfully. People will call it luck. They'll say you changed suddenly. They won't see the years of repetition. They won't see the boring days. They'll only see the results. And that's fine. Because consistency was never about recognition. It was about becoming unbreakable. Eventually, consistency becomes self-sustaining. You don't push yourself. You protect the system. You guard your habits like assets. This is where quitting feels expensive. Not emotionally, but identity-wise. Stopping would mean betraying who you are now. That's when unstoppable stops being a word and becomes a fact. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to announce goals. You let your actions speak. Consistency teaches you patience. Patience teaches you power. Power teaches you calm confidence. And calm confidence is the most dangerous kind, because it doesn't rush. It doesn't doubt. It doesn't break. This is the mindset that builds careers, movements, bodies, skills, and legacies. Not intensity, not motivation. Consistency, day after day, action after action, promise kept after promise kept. And when you live this way long enough, one truth becomes clear. You were never stuck. You were just inconsistent. Now, you're not. If you've made it this far, understand something important. This wasn't just an audiobook you listened to. This was a decision you sat with. A reminder of who you are capable of becoming when you stop quitting on yourself. Consistency isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters repeatedly without excuses. It's about honoring the small actions that most people ignore. Because those small actions shape your future whether you respect them or not. You don't need to feel different after listening to this. You need to act different tomorrow. Not perfectly. Not dramatically. Just consistently. One action. One promise kept. One moment where you choose discipline over comfort. That's how momentum restarts. You don't need to rush. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to continue. Let others burn out chasing intensity. You'll keep moving at a pace that lasts. There will be days when nothing seems to change. That's normal. That's the process working. Growth is quiet before it's obvious. Trust the repetition. From this point forward, stop asking if you're capable. Start asking if you're willing to stay consistent long enough for your capability to show. Because the truth is simple. If you keep showing up, life has no choice but to respond. If you keep building, progress has no choice but to appear. If you stay consistent, unstoppable becomes inevitable. You are no longer the person who starts and stops. You are the person who continues. And that changes everything. So when this audiobook ends, don't look for another one immediately. Sit with this. Apply it. Let your actions become the motivation. Come back to this message whenever your mind tries to negotiate quitting. Let it remind you that consistency is not something you chase. It's something you choose. Again, and again, and again. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll look back and understand. You didn't become unstoppable all at once. You became unstoppable by never stopping. Consistency doesn't mean you never fail. It means failure doesn't stop you. It means you don't turn one bad day into a bad identity. You learn, adjust, and return to the work without drama. Most people don't quit because they fail. They quit because they judge themselves for failing. Consistency removes judgment. It replaces it with action. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What's the next step?" That shift alone saves years of wasted energy. Unstoppable people don't waste time replaying mistakes. They extract the lesson and move forward. Emotionally neutral, strategically focused. When you commit to consistency, you stop living in extremes. No all-or-nothing mindset. No perfection traps. You understand that progress lives in the middle, not at the peak. Even on low-effort days, you show up in some form. That keeps the chain alive. And once the chain is alive, momentum never fully dies. Consistency teaches resilience quietly. You don't notice it day to day. But over time, you realize setbacks don't hit as hard. Delays don't frustrate you as much. You recover faster. That's real strength. Your confidence stops being fragile because it's no longer based on outcomes. It's based on behavior. And behavior is something you control. This is why consistent people are calm under pressure. They don't panic because they trust their process. They've seen it work before. When consistency is present, comparison disappears. You stop watching others because your focus is locked on execution. Your lane becomes enough. This also protects your energy. You stop wasting mental effort on decisions that don't matter. You already know what today requires. And when your mind is clear, performance improves. Consistency also sharpens patience. You stop forcing timelines. You stop rushing growth. You let results mature instead of pulling them early. That patience compounds. It shows up in how you speak, how you move, how you handle problems. People feel it. This is how leadership is built. Not through words, but through reliability. When you show up every day, people trust you without explanation. Consistency builds credibility even in silence. Over time, you realize something powerful. You don't need to chase confidence. Confidence follows consistency automatically. You don't need external motivation. Your past follow-through becomes the motivation. You look back and think, "I've done this before. I'll do it again." That belief is earned, not imagined. And once belief is earned, quitting feels irrational. This is the phase where goals stop feeling heavy. They start feeling inevitable, because you're no longer asking if you'll show up. There comes a moment when consistency stops being something you force and starts being something you protect. You stop asking how to do more and start asking how to avoid breaking what you've built. This is maturity. This is long game thinking. Most people burn out because they confuse progress with punishment. They push too hard, ignore recovery, and then disappear. Consistency isn't about exhaustion. It's about sustainability. You learn to pace yourself. You learn when to push and when to recover without quitting. Rest becomes strategic, not emotional. That's a key difference. Unstoppable people don't disappear when they rest. They return on schedule. That alone keeps them ahead. Consistency also teaches you restraint. You stop chasing every opportunity. You stop saying yes to things that drain your focus. You realize that protecting your energy is part of the work. Focus becomes sharper. Priorities become clearer. Noise fades. At this level, discipline feels clean, simple, almost boring. And that's exactly why it works. You stop waiting for breakthroughs. You trust accumulation. Small efforts stack quietly until one day the results surprise everyone except you. Because you've seen the math. You also stop romanticizing struggle. Pain is no longer proof of progress. Consistent execution is. You become efficient, calm, direct. When setbacks happen, you don't spiral. You zoom out. One day doesn't matter when your system is intact. One miss doesn't erase months of showing up. This is emotional strength most people never build. Consistency also changes how you speak to yourself. The inner dialogue becomes quieter, more respectful. You don't threaten yourself with guilt. You guide yourself with standards. That shift alone changes everything. Your standards rise naturally. You stop tolerating behaviors that don't match who you are anymore. Not because you're strict, but because you've evolved. And evolution doesn't go backward easily. People will feel the difference. You'll notice it in how they respond to you, how they listen, how they trust your word. Because consistency builds silent authority. At this stage, success feels less dramatic and more stable. Less explosive, more dependable. And dependable always wins long-term. This is where careers solidify, bodies transform, skills sharpen, reputations lock in. Not through motivation, through presence. You are there when others disappear. You continue when others reset. You move forward while others explain. That's not luck. That's consistency in motion. And once you live this way long enough, there's a quiet realization that settles in. You don't fear starting over anymore. Because you know you won't. At this stage, consistency rewires how you experience doubt. Doubt doesn't disappear, but it loses authority. It becomes information, not a command. You hear it, acknowledge it, and keep moving anyway. Most people let doubt vote. Consistent people don't. They understand that doubt shows up whenever growth demands expansion. So instead of stopping, they use it as a signal that they're on the right path. Consistency also builds emotional neutrality. Wins don't make you reckless. Losses don't make you quit. You stay centered, stable, grounded. This is rare power. When your emotions stop controlling your actions, freedom begins. You're no longer a hostage to mood, energy, or external validation. You act because it's time to act. This is when pressure stops feeling heavy. Because pressure only breaks people who rely on motivation. Systems don't break under pressure. They execute. Consistency turns effort into routine. Routine turns stress into structure. Structure creates confidence. And confidence built this way doesn't shake. You also stop needing constant reassurance. You don't need to be told you're doing well. Your progress speaks quietly, but clearly. You know what your days look like. You know what your weeks produce. You know what your months become. That certainty is calming. Consistency also simplifies ambition. Big goals stop feeling overwhelming because they're no longer approached all at once. They're approached today, just today. That mindset removes fear. You don't need to carry the weight of the future. You just need to handle the present with discipline. And when you do that consistently, the future takes care of itself. This is where most people misunderstand success. They think success requires intensity forever. It doesn't. It requires alignment. Alignment between who you say you are and what you do daily. When that alignment exists, friction disappears. You stop forcing yourself to act. Action becomes the natural expression of identity. You don't hype yourself up anymore. You don't threaten yourself anymore. You don't bargain with comfort. You move. And movement, sustained over time, becomes unstoppable momentum. Eventually, you realize something subtle but powerful. You're no longer chasing change. You are change. Your habits reflect it. Your language reflects it. Your standards reflect it. This is the quiet phase where mastery forms. No noise, no rush, just consistency, compounding.